Truth Bombers Podcast. Truth Bombers Podcast. The group chat turned podcast with your hosts, Russ, Lockie, and BJ.
Boys. Thursday night, team selection. What a time to be an Essendon fan. Very, very interesting changes, chops and changes, ins and outs. We're going to get to everything on, this is now episode 10. We actually had a pretty long preseason, lads. So yeah. Much like half of our list, or I should say unlike half of our list, the wheels are still on. So congratulations to both of you, podcast fit and ready as we take on the season heading into round 2. Now, before we get to this week's list, a few things I want to shout out to. Russ mentioned a few weeks ago when we had Archie Perkins on the podcast that we were 5 podcasts in now, and at the time that the boys were getting around the club, the podcast was floating around, people had heard of us. I just want you two to know that the Essendon Football Club is not the only footy club that word of the podcast is spreading around. The White Horse Pioneers Football Club down here, Divi 3 Eastern Football League, it's spreading around too. And we'll have a couple of new listeners starting from, they'll be listening tomorrow on the golfing range. So shout out to Jimmy Fassen and his brother, who I guess is Brother Fass, and their dad, Mr. Fass. So we've just doubled our listenership, boys, from the 3 of us to 3 more. We're kicking goals.
I'll add to that. I was out with my boss yesterday, mad Essendon supporter, sent him a couple of links. We've got 2 more supporters, him and his brother. So in 2 days, we've tripled our listening.
Mate, those growth numbers, Russ, if you doing that for Peters, they'd be stoked you'd be getting a raise. All right, so just quickly, again, one more thing before we get into it. I know we're all keen. The footy tipping comp, which is something that we probably forgot to update. Actually, I think it was even still in progress when we recorded our review episode of the Geelong game. We've got 20 people in the comp, so I think that's a pretty good turnout for the start of the year. Now, we did have each of us put a lock in for the week, for which, getting it wrong, we were going to determine that there is a penalty. Lock's lock was the Tigs beating the Blues, which obviously didn't go to plan. And we've come up with the penalty. It's going to be $20 in the tin, and that tin is going to be used to purchase some of the booze, or hopefully most of the booze, come our either grand final or maybe little end of season trip. We might make our way down to Forest Hill Chase for our end of season trip or something similar there, boys.
Yeah.
All right. So obviously round 2 is underway. And maybe for the best, before we give our locks for this week, the Dogs are down at halftime by 5 goals to the Blues. So definitely was not expecting that. Lockie, I'll start with you, mate. Who is your lock for this week?
Ooh, I found this week quite hard. Easy Melbourne.
Oh, come on, mate.
He's on a budget.
Well, my tip didn't get up last week, so I got to play it safe.
Nice. Russ?
I thought it was pretty hard too. I was going through for an actual lock. I thought it was a bit hard. I went for Dockers to beat Saints on Sunday. Yeah.
All right.
That's my lock.
That was going to be my lock as well, but I might be a little bit daring this week. I'm going to lock the Pies to beat the Crows.
Yeah, good. I reckon that's good. I think that's a good lock. After I watched them live on last Friday, I think the way they beat Saints, I reckon they're going to demolish the Crows for sure.
I didn't think the Crows played badly, actually. I watched that Dockers game. They were very unlucky not to win that. Maybe the spoil of the year. If that doesn't win the Bouncers Golden Fist this year, there's definitely something wrong. And shout out, Lockie, to Brodie Harrison and John Court, who are both leading the footy comp with 7 correct tips from round 1.
Pretty good.
Very impressive. All right, boys. Let's get to it. Now, how do we want to do this? Will I run through the team and then we can have a chat about some of the more interesting ins and outs? Is there anything anybody would like to start with or preface before we get into it?
I can run through it. I think the biggest one we already knew about going into today was Martin being out. We all knew that was going to happen with his close COVID contact. What are your thoughts on that? I actually kind of think it's, in a way, it's kind of good. Like, he's coming off such a big game. If we're relying on him to kick another 5 goals to win the game, we're in trouble from a first-year player. It takes a bit of the stress coming off, the anticipation. If he came out again this week, didn't have quite that sort of stellar game with all the pressure, everyone looking at him. I don't mind him taking a week off and coming back next week with no pressure.
I could not disagree anymore with that statement. I think we've talked about our troubles in front of goals and when we're going to get them. We had someone we didn't expect to kick up, and he's kicked 5. And as far as I'm kind of thinking now, we've just lost, what proved to be a pretty decent avenue to goal, and still haven't fixed that forward line.
I think we're in a lot of trouble if we're worried that a guy that's played one game for us is going to be our saviour in this game.
Don't think he's going to be a savior, but I think it hurts. And honestly, like close COVID contact with like AFL stuff now, surely we're at a point where we've like passed that. No,
I don't think so.
Locke, your thoughts, mate?
Look, I'm a little bit on the fence. I think that, 2 weeks ago, if you had have said Nick Martin won't play round 2, you'd be like, yeah, so. Obviously, his debut was just so incredible. You would love to see him play again. You would have a little bit of a drop-off. Like, you can't expect that from him every week. But it is disappointing not to see him play.
All right, let's go through it. Some very interesting, not just name selections, but I think position names as well, which we'll definitely get to. But obviously, the big in, Stringer comes back, Duzza, Big Durham comes back, and Francis comes back in. Obviously, Langford is out with a hamstring. Martin, as we just mentioned, has the health and safety protocols. As Lockie called it, Braden Ham has been omitted and Baldwin has been omitted as well, which I probably thought would be the case. I think you two both thought he'd done enough to stay in. And Cutler has been elevated, so he's been named in the side. He was medical sub last week, and it's also Jordan Ridley's 50th game this week as well. So starting from the full back line, James Stewart, Mason Redmond, Jake Kelly. Starting from the halfbacks, Nick Hind, Aaron Francis named at centre halfback, not where Lockie would have put him, that's for sure. And Andrew McGrath on the other back flank there as well. Dyson Heppel starts on the wing, Merritt in the middle with Cox on the other wing. Dylan Shield moves to half forward. Jake Stringer at centre half forward. Archie Perkins remains on the forward flank. Jaden Laverde has been named in the forward pocket, with Peter Wright at full forward and Devin Smith in the other pocket. Draper in the ruck with Caldwell and Parrish, and Ridley on the bench with Cutler, Durham, and my boy Matt Guelphy. BZT and Braden Ham, Andrew Phillips, and Tex Wangani named as emergencies. Now, the first thing that sticks out to me is I don't like Tex being named as an emergency purely for the reason that I believe he will be the sub, and I think that is the shittest way to make your debut, is to go on as a medical sub, potentially not even come on the ground, and that's your first AFL game. I think it's a terrible way to do it.
I 100% agree with that, and I really hope we don't name it a debutant as a sub, and you go through the ceremony. Like, obviously his dad's going to give him his first jersey. The family comes out. There's no injuries, and you sit on the bench with the. I think that's a horrible way to debut someone. I personally think they're going to go safe and just put Ham as the sub. Looking at those emergencies, I know we talked about Flip being a good sub last week. Do you reckon this week going up against Lions that they don't have as many tools, I guess, as Geelong? Would you still play Flip as the sub this week, Bernard?
Lockie, I'll throw that one to you, mate. You were pretty big on having an extra tall in the list last week. You thought that was a big mistake against the Cats.
Yeah, so I do think Brisbane are a little bit of a different team. I think Francis coming in obviously is an extra tall, but they've dropped Baldwin. But I think Francis is just that little bit taller. Stringer coming in, he's that sort of like big body, obviously in the middle, who can push forward. I don't mind the lineup. I don't think we need an extra ruckman, but I would hate to see Peter Wright in exactly the same situation last weekend being put into our defensive 50 in ruck contests. I think he can ruck forward of centre, but I don't want to ever see him rucking in our back line.
I think it's an interesting call with Laverde playing up forward. Obviously, that's where he started his career. He was in and out of the side, super inconsistent. I think we were pretty unanimous, him being like the most improved player from last year, throwing him down back. And I guess if you've had Francis been training with the forward group, to me, this kind of reeks of Nathan Buckley throwing Darcy Moore forward with like just throwing in all the chips in the basket towards the end of last year, and it backfired terribly.
I don't think that'll happen. I think Francis will play forward. Laverde will be back. Ridley will start on the field. I think they've just named a team. I wouldn't put any surety in those players starting in those positions.
Okay.
They've done it before. So they've done it in previous years where players have just been in completely different spots and they don't start there.
You think they're just saying, here's our 22, we'll figure it out on the day?
Absolutely.
Is it possible that he's gone forward? I know the injuries that took in that first quarter last week that they're putting him forward just to, I don't know, I'm just hypothesizing here that they're trying to put him up forward just to get a little bit of out of the contest a little bit and not get as roughed up as last week. I'm surprised he's actually playing this week after seeing him struggle through last week's game and seeing how sore he is. Is that a possibility that they're throwing up forward, that they don't want him to get in that big body contest?
They're protecting him, you reckon?
Yeah, possibly. Like again, I'm just hypothesizing. Maybe that's the reason they've got him up forward. Like he's fit enough to play, but they don't want to risk him in those like real big clunking, backline crunches where he's just putting his body on the line, trying to outbody people. The
Lions have a pretty like stocky backline, right?
Yeah.
Like Harris Andrews obviously is kind of that long and lanky build, but he hits pretty hard. And what's that other back's name? Not Berry. Real thick looking dude.
There's Darcy Gardner, who's pretty solid.
Payne? Is it Payne?
There's the guy that played for Doggies, Marcus Adams. Is that his name?
Marcus Adams. That's who I'm thinking of. Should have pulled the Brisbane lineup. But I think I think we're at a game, and I think given what happened last week, this is not a game where you can take someone in that needs protecting. I think if you're naming players, like especially up forward, like we need contests up there. We need to be like making a scramble, hitting hard, offensive, like forward 50 pressure, causing stoppages. Like I don't think now's the time to try to protect someone by playing them up forward. I think if he's playing, he's fully fit.
I think I don't think they'll line up in those positions. I'll put that as my lock for the week. That Laverde will start back and Francis will play forward.
We've never had a lock that doesn't come through, so I'll back you on that one.
Sammy Draper, probably very, very lucky to be named and be playing this week after that stupid fucking brain fade on Asava Radaglia. I can't believe he only got fined for that. This was a crazy, crazy week for the tribunal. I don't know if you guys have watched 360 or any of that, but it's been like 2 days of just watching the Willie Rioli footage and just being like, how is that not a week? How is Draper's only a $2,000 fine? And then poor old Mitch Robinson's like, yeah, that's a week. It's been a very interesting week at the tribunal.
I'm worried for Drapes, to be honest. Like, you know, the way that we're sort of interpreting the high hits and sort of the hits on people these days, if you elect to bump and there's an injury, then you cop it. And he elected to bump more than not. And I'm like, you're a couple of weeks away from getting wiped out, I reckon. I'm worried about Draper. But in the same sense, though, I like that we have an enforcer in the team and someone that's just going to stick up for the other boys in there and show them his boss. I like that sort of mongrel in him.
Yeah, it's hard too when you are that tall. Like it's hard not to collect blokes below, you know, that are shorter than you, too high.
Yeah, and it's easier to collect them with an innocent elbow when you elect to bump. You're not trying to do it, but when you're 2 feet taller than everyone else on the field, you're going to have some accidents out there.
Yeah, I think for the most part, you should be electing to tackle. You should be trying to wrap up the ball carrier. You should be trying to pin an arm, take it to ground, get them out of the contest, personally.
Yeah.
Lockie, who gets Danaher?
Well, we sort of talked a little bit about this last week. maybe it's a case that it's similar to Hawkins and Cameron when they were both on the field, where we have a few players that are rotating. Like maybe if it's further up the ground, then it's more like a Ridley or Laverde. Maybe if it's closer to goal, it's a Stewart. It depends what Danaher's role is. If he's a deep forward, I think it'll be a different player than if he is someone who's roaming up the ground, maybe making it into ruck contests.
Russ, agree?
Yeah, I'm a bit on the fence about this. We probably, I'm with you, Locke. I think Laverde will just end up playing back. And he's a difficult one because he's got so much athleticism, but I really want to get someone on him that's just going to get into his head as well. I don't think Stewart's probably going to be outbodied by him if we just have that sort of tall on tall out the back. I'd like to get someone that actually can stay with him in, because we know how fast and explosive he can be. But I also want to get someone maybe like Red Dog that can get in his head and chirp away at him at the same time. And I know he's probably not got the size on him, but I want someone to just get in his head. We know that we can mentally get on top of him and pull him over the game.
I think Danaher will step on Redmond if he's playing on him, mate.
Just a little bit of chirp. I think you underestimate how fragile the man is.
I sort of agree with you, Russ, but I would like it as a collective from our back line that they just go out of their way just to rough him up a little bit.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be big hits behind the ball. It doesn't have to be playing like a different player on him. But if you've got an opportunity just to bump into him and it's not going to be a free kick, then bump into him. There's nothing wrong with, sort of having a tactic where it's like, we're going to go after a really good forward of theirs and shut him down a little bit. Make it the game harder for him.
What we should do is get Mason Redmond to go up behind him, get down on all fours, and then someone to push him so he falls over.
Hey, that's a Russell Wilk special right there.
I don't doubt it. Question without notice for you lads. Name two players who need to have much better games, and I guess limit it to two because I could name 22 of them from last week or 21 of them from last week. But whose spots on the line the most for this week?
I'll go first. I don't know. Not everyone agrees with this, and everyone sees him as being a lock in house the best 22. But I honestly think 2 meter Peter needs to fucking pick up his game. I honestly think his spot is very vulnerable at the moment. No one else agrees with me. I understand with that. But I don't think what he did last week, yes, he got 2 goals. And, you guys have been big on he only needs to get those 2 goals just to get us in the game. I think we need more from him. He needs to be taking the ball to ground for the small forwards because we know where a lot of those goals from our forward line are going to come from those small forwards. He needs to be better in the air, better on the grounds. The second efforts, the defensive work in the forward 50. I would be happy if he only scores 1 goal this week, but actually assists maybe another goal or gets it to ground and we actually get some score involsions with him. And it's hard to go past either Merritt. I know he's only said 2, but it's hard to go past either Merritt or Parrish. We need one of those guys to actually get some center clearances out there. David King during the week was very big on, he did a lot of that analysis on I think the first kick, was it? First crack, and then a lot on SEN during the week, sort of saying they played some vision of it. It wasn't really the big bodies that took the center clearances out of that midfield last week. It was the fact that we fumbled that first touch. We need to be a lot more cleaner, get that first touch and actually do something with their first touch to get those center clearances.
Yep. Lock?
I agree with both of those, Russ. I'll throw up 2 other names just because we've got so many to select from. Cox. I think Cox is on the edge of being dropped to the 2s. I think he needs to sort of have a really consistent game, maybe make a little bit more of an impact, especially forward of centre. And if I was to throw up a second name, it'd be Devin Smith. I need him to return to his best and fairest year where he was a tackling machine.
Yes.
I think it was blight on our players last week that we didn't have a player above 5 tackles.
4.
Well, I know that him in his best and fairest season was averaging 9 to 10. So please return to that sort of ferocity and attack on the ball on the other player opposition.
Where was he playing in his Crichton year? What
He was
position?
through the midfield.
Yeah, because he's named it forward pocket. Like, it can be like, and I agree. Like, I want to start seeing more than just Devin Smith have 8 tackles, especially if we're losing the game. Like, if we don't have much of the ball and we're losing, every player should have close to 8 tackles, because you don't have the ball. What else are you doing? But when you're playing in the forward pocket, it can be hard to get that involved if you're 10 goals down and the ball's spending a majority of time down the other end of the field. But I guess arguably as well, take yourself up and get involved in the game, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I had Nick Cox on my list as well. I think, not that he's skating past on kind of like the reps that he had last year, but I think he's not necessarily doing anything wrong, but just like you said, like just not having an impact. Kind of out there, like taking a spot on the list. I mean, arguably though, like not quite sure who we'd bring in. Even kind of looking at those emergencies, there's no one there that sort of stands out to me that's like in vying for Cox's position there on the wing. So I think there's probably a few players that are in that position and I think Wright is one of those players, especially until like Jones, is ready and back. It's like, who would take his spot? Maybe Phillips, but even Phillips, I don't think you're going to line up at full forward, right? So.
Yeah, I know you thought he didn't have. I mean, like you thought he had enough to. Like Kane Baldwin had enough just to stay in that game. I was pretty bullish on him for the last couple of weeks, and I would just rather put game time into to Baldwin than let Peter just sort of coast through a game and try and get 2 lucky goals. For me, I see there's a lot more. I see 2 meters ceiling being pretty low. And we don't know what Kane Baldwin can do yet. So
yeah, you have a second ruck with Wright in the team, right? You don't have that with Baldwin.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of why everyone sort of sees him as that sort of lock to sort of stay in. And that, all right, if you took away his rucking ability, not that he has that much, but he's got the height to do it. Would you put in, let's say, Kane Baldwin, Peter Wright, take out the rucking of it? Who would you keep in this squad?
I still pick Peter Wright.
Okay. Yep.
I just think he's inconsistent, but we know what he can do, right? But I also think that's been Mason Cox's position for the last 2 years at Collingwood, and he's still only had 2 good games in the 3 years that he's been in. So I understand that it can
sweep her shades.
Easy. All right, boys, any final remarks, any closing comments? It's a weeknight, it's a school night. I know we've all got early starts in the morning, so I don't want to keep you here all night. Yeah,
I'd like to talk about Stringer before we sort of sum up. Like, for me, I think I'm a bit nervous playing him. I want him to be 110% before we risk him, because I honestly think, he's our Dusty, he's our X factor. Like, I don't believe that, Richmond could win 3 premierships if they didn't have Dusty in their side. And I think Stringer is our X factor, that we need someone like a Stringer to win a couple of games and get lucky with a couple of games and to break a couple. Like, he has the ability to win us a couple of games off his own boot and no one else's. And I think he's so important to our game. And you look at the fact that he wasn't in the first 10 games of last season, he didn't feature too much. And then we came home very strong in the last 10. And I think that had a lot to do with him being such an explosive player for us in those last 10 games. I just don't want to risk him at all. And listening to Truck in his press conference this morning, I think it was, before they had their final run before selection, someone asked him, do you put him in the forward line, baby him a little bit to get to that first game? And Truck didn't say, no, he's 100% ready to go. He's like, yeah, that's going to come in. That's going to be a factor we look at when we sort of name the side and, how we play him during the game. We'll assess it during the game. That means they know he's not 110%. He's probably at 90 and they're willing to risk it again. And I want to be 110 for me. I don't want to have I want 0 risk.
There's no such thing as 0 risk, mate.
Oh, well.
Lockie?
I love that Durham has been named in the side. I think if we're talking blue-collar Bombers, he is someone who just seems to give absolute effort. He is willing to run. He is willing to tackle. And even if there's maybe a player or two that's more skillful that could have been added to the side, I think he just adds a bit of something. I like seeing Francis back in, although I feel like Kane Baldwin's a little bit stiff. And you mentioned this earlier, but I would hate to see Wanganeen named as a sub in his very first game.
Yeah.
Although I did lock him into my side.
You actually need a lock.
So I sort of need him to play. You
need your first lock for the season.
Yeah. Well, I got Martin.
Baldwin. Yeah.
2 out of 3 ain't bad, Russ.
Lovely, boys. I'm going to put one big call on, and Russ, I think you'll like this. If Stringer wins the first clearance and we go on to win the game.
And the flag.
And the flag. Final thought, realistically, if you had to put a percentage on it, what do you reckon our chance of coming away with a win is? Or should I ask, has anyone tipped us this week? Okay.
Don't ask that question.
Do you think we're 60-40 or worse?
Yeah, look, I think every time I look back to the worst bowl era, and I feel like the last game we had was very worst bowl era sort of game. And every time we get pumped, the boys come back and just go, you know what, I don't care we're playing. They come back the next week and let them make a point. And I'm not saying we're going to win the next couple of games, but after we get pumped, they always come back motivated and to prove a point. So I'm pretty bullish that, I say, 60-40. We got a chance of winning 40%.
I'll take the loss, but I can't take another 10-goal dropping.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we'll leave it there. We'll put the boys on notice. Thank you, lads. It's been lonely in the studio tonight without the two of you. But appreciate your time. Our first Thursday show all wrapped up. I'm going to chuck this one straight up now. So, Russ, make sure you join the footy tipping comp. I don't think you're in it.
No, I joined it.
What's your name in it? Is it Russ?
I think it's Russell with it's the same. I mean, whatever the Glass Street one is.
No. You got to come along, mate. Come on, up your game.
I joined my work one and I joined that one at the same time. And I got the work one.
Mate, you were slow on the YouTube uptake. We're being slow on the Instagram follow. We're not in the footy tips. We haven't had one TikTok go up yet. What's going on, Russell?
Have you not been following the TikTok?
I have followed it. We've got nothing on there.
Well, Ben, go pull up your TikTok right now. And let's see how much of a fool you are.
Did you start a new one or did you use the one I set up for you?
No, use the one you set up for us.
It says, share your first video.
I don't know. Can I share my screen on here?
Here, mate. I'll share my screen.
We have 1,500 likes already.
No, we do not.
Oh, all right. I'm going to 1,500 views. I'm going to send you a screenshot right now.
All right. Perfect. All right. And with that, if you are listening and it's your first time listening and you've enjoyed the dribble that we've been talking, make sure you do like and subscribe. Come engage with us. Give us your thoughts. Lockie, I will see you tomorrow, mate. Russ, I will catch you over the weekend. And until then, go Bombers.
Go Bombers.